Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com. Get an in-depth preview of the Chicago Bears' next opponent and John Buffone's passionate rants on Buffone 55 Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Central. Welcome to Greg Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia, and the handsome gentleman beside me is, of course, Greg Gabriel.
You know, Aldo, you got to get rid of some of those pics you have in the lead-in. That's when I was 40 pounds heavier.
I'll work on that right away. We'll squeeze him and make you look thinner. You do look super good, man. What were you at the gym today?
Every day. I didn't go Saturday because we had friends over for the weekend, and they used to live here. Now they live in Vegas, and we partied a little bit Friday night. So,
oh, nice.
Didn't make it Saturday, but I went Sunday through Friday, and I went yesterday. I went this morning. I usually go about between 6 and 7.
Oh, that's about what time I'm going to bed. So a.m.
No, 6 or 7 in the morning. You're not.
That's what I meant. You look at all that booze back there. You think that's going to drink itself? Hey, Greg, look at what Chris Watts is saying. He says, "Hey, Greg and Aldo, being a Bears fan is as hard as trying to figure out the meaning of life." Bear down, mate. He's from across
here we
the
go.
pond.
We got to walk people off the ledge again. Probably including
That's right. That's how you start every show now.
It is what it is. Part of this, and I really believe this, and I'm not questioning anything, but I think that if Andy Dalton had been the starter, there'd be 1 or 2 more wins, but the team is still not a good team. The offense is a product of playing with a rookie that's still trying to figure things out. What I don't get, and I can't understand, because they had a run there of about 3 games where they played really good, is what the hell happened to the defense?
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, the last 2 weeks it's not bad. It's horrendous.
Right.
Giving up, and not the screenplay was bad enough, but the play to me that was worse than the screenplay was the guy running it in from 5 yards through all those elephants on the Bears defensive line and pushing them back.
Yeah.
That was disturbing to me.
Yeah, that showed a lack of grit, a lack of wanting it more than the opposing team.
Well, and I don't want to say in fairness, but I know Hicks was kind of high. He hit the guy at about the 4-yard line, and he kind of jumped on his back. And most normal people would go down if that guy jumped on your back, but that wasn't the case here. And
Right.
they all got carried right into the end zone. I mean, that's a ton of beef there that got moved.
Yeah, indeed. The Bears defense, they had 0 sacks, they had 0 quarterback hits, they had 0 takeaways, they forced 0 punts. The Niners gained almost 9 yards per play for a total of 467. And so many of those plays were explosive plays. I mean, over and over again, you looked up at the TV and there was a big explosive play. And the play that you mentioned, that screenplay right here, it was, according to Matt Nagy this morning, was a backbreaker.
Oh, there's no question. That's when I'm thinking about that, if I recall correctly, that's the first series they had the ball in the second half, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, I'm thinking, okay, it's 3rd and 19. The Bears are going to get the ball right back. And at that point, they had like a 10 or 12 minute advantage in time of possession. And I go, they're going to wear this defense down now.
That's what I thought.
And all of a sudden, boom, they're right back in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it was. And Brad Briggs did an excellent job of detailing everything that went wrong. And Matt Nagy's kind of summed it all up. It's just a bunch of players here taking a bad angle to the ball carrier. Right. After that great effort by Edwards, everyone that had a chance to get him just had a bad angle. And
right.
That's
it was it was a back-breaking play, and then the play I mentioned. But there was just too many of them. Guys were the soft coverage in the secondary, quarterback getting too much time to throw, not enough pressure. Overall, I mean, if you want to grade the defense off yesterday, it was an F.
Yep. Here's just a random amounts of explosive plays that I picked from the highlight reel. Explosive plays are most people determine it as running plays of plus 15 yards and pass plays of 20 or more yards. And the 49ers had more than their share. And then I saw this analytic too, that typically a team that has 2+ more explosive plays than the opponent goes on to win a football game over 85% of the time. And so that seems to be, in a nutshell, what happened yesterday. It was those explosive plays. The 49ers had more of them.
No question. And very disappointing because, like I said, up until a couple of weeks ago, till really up until the Tampa Bay game, the defense has been playing sound football.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like they're no-shows.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the reasoning? Is opposing offensive coordinators figuring out what Sean Desai is doing? Or is Sean Desai calling a bad game in down and distance situation? I don't have the answer to that. You got to be sitting in Halas Hall. By the way, I missed the first maybe 2 minutes of Nagy's presser, and obviously he wasn't in Halas Hall. Did he give an update? Is he is he close to being back, or is he sitting in the bunker again all week?
He did not specify. He, in typical Matt Nagy fashion, he talked about what it was like to watch the game from home. He talked about.
No, I heard all that. I just heard.
He started with that too. He started.
I missed the opening comments, and so I was wondering, but right away it was obvious he wasn't at Halas Hall.
Yeah, because that.
He's probably at home down in his basement, but maybe he's got to be in a quarantine. Maybe just, they built that new hotel right down the street from Halas Hall. Maybe he's got a suite there that he's living in for all we know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Chris has a question. Were the Bears outcoached yesterday?
No, they're outplayed.
Yeah.
It's not a hard game. The team that plays harder wins. And in all honesty, it was a satisfactory game, and at least for 3/4 of the game on offense, it was a satisfactory game. Then they got behind and they were kind of force the issue a little bit, and that's not going to be Justin Fields' cup of tea quite yet.
Right.
To play from behind. But, the way they ran the offense early on, the running game was pretty good. Fields himself, I tweeted out midway through the game, I said he's playing with a little swagger today.
I saw that, yeah.
And I like that. And, one was after there was a run he had to the right, and then just his reaction after that run.
Yeah.
That's when I tweeted. I really like that. But and then that touchdown run, I mean, that was all him. There's probably not another quarterback in the league that could do that.
Yeah, maybe Lamar and Kyler are the only other ones. I think Dan Pompei wrote that today at The Athletic. But, yeah, we've got just highlights of all of his positive plays here. And that last run, this is a tremendous pass to Jesse James.
Great. I mean, he's off balance. He's rolling to his left. He's got to throw across his body. He doesn't have his feet set. And really, Nagy said it in his presser. He goes, that was a big-time NFL throw, and it was.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
I mean, that shows you in one play what he can be when he finally reaches that level.
Right.
Now, now the question is, who's going to be coaching him?
Well, we'll get to that topic in just a few minutes, but you're absolutely right, because the question now is, is he in the right system? Does he have the right support staff in terms of coaches? And I think it was Brad Biggs who wrote, the question though also is what about the weapons around him? Does he have enough weapons? And right now the answer to that is no.
Well, I see. That's where I disagree a little bit. I think there's some weapons.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not being utilized.
Mm-hmm.
Is A-Rob any worse than he was a year ago? No
way.
Okay, but again, you got a rookie quarterback who just doesn't get the ball out of his hand quick enough at times. Mm-hmm. or is quick enough to go through a progression. And the guy that he is favoring as his number one, and maybe it's the design of some of these plays, is number 11, Mooney. Mm-hmm. So, A-Rob's not getting the touches. And I've said it before, I don't think there's any way that he is going to be on the Chicago Bears roster next year.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have to make some decisions.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is going to be, are there going to be changes made at the end of the season? And when we're sitting here, what's the record? 2-5?
3-5.
Or 3-5. Okay, well, you're sitting here at 3-5 in a 3-game losing streak, and some tough games coming up in Pittsburgh and Baltimore, two very physical football teams.
Mm-hmm.
It looks bleak.
Yep, it sure does. Well, and so what's your opinion? And we all know that in the history of the Chicago Bears franchise, over 100 years, there's never been a head coach who has been fired during the season. Of course, Halas wasn't going to fire himself. He was the coach for the majority of those years. But nonetheless, do you think it's at all possible that, if the Steelers beat up on the Bears, that we could see a coaching change during the bye week?
I don't see it if they make a change. I don't see it then. It obviously it could, and I know I'm covering my ass here. I just don't see it this early. But I'll tell you what's going to change things around the league, and we've never talked about it. That it's been written about, because it's only been a new rule for a very short time, and you can start interviewing people in the last couple of weeks of the regular season.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you're not going to interview somebody unless you got a job open. You can't, because you got to put in a permission slip to go interview them.
Okay.
Unless they're a college coach or a coach that is not working. And hell, you can interview those guys right now if you want. Mm-hmm. But if you want to interview somebody within the league,
Mm-hmm.
In order to do that, you have to send a permission slip in. They got to grant permission. And in most cases, because it's a head coaching job, they have to grant permission. So not in most cases, in all cases, they have to. And so, are you going to interview somebody for a job that's not existent? So the answer to that is no. So you've got to have already made a decision to release a guy and have that release done.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will say this. When I worked in corporate America, we would sometimes interview people in the event that there was going to be an opening. That way you have a portfolio, a list of potential candidates. It's succession planning. You want to make sure that if the head coach, drops dead, or the guy working in accounting drops dead, you've got other accountants online to bring them in a pinch. And so does that happen at all? Or does that thinking happen at all in the NFL?
Well, I can tell you my experience. And my experience was our first year here, we didn't come on board until June of 2001. And we were told that we had to keep Dick Duran for that season because it was June. And so, but we were based on what the circumstances were the year before. We were under the assumption that we were probably going to have a new coach the following year. And we were doing preparation work during that season. All for naught, because we ended up, winning the division, the old NFC Central.
Right.
I got the game ball up here somewhere.
Oh, cool.
And, so that went out the window because Dick got an extension. But then, a couple of years later, we were doing the same thing during the season. As far as we weren't talking to individual coaches, we were doing preliminary work as far as some background checks and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Makes perfect
sense.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be prepared.
Right.
And so, and at that point, we started that final year, Dick's final year. If you recall, we opened up out in San Francisco and got totally blown out. And so, the writing was on the wall right then and there.
Yeah. So, tomorrow's the trade deadline. So a lot of people are wondering, if the Bears don't make a move, is that a signal? I mean, there's so many questions that I have regarding the trade deadline.
Okay.
Please.
Let's. It's a non-day. Yeah, there was a trade for Von Miller today. You get a handful, maybe very rarely even a dozen trades at the NFL trade deadline. It's not baseball. It's not basketball. It's not hockey, where you got 50 trades going on or more at the trade deadline. I mean, some teams make 4 or 5 moves themselves. That doesn't happen in the NFL. And I'll tell you a great article to read. Peter King's football Monday Morning Football article this morning.
Excellent
he
stuff.
Talks about it. He said, how can a GM or a head coach in their right mind, even if a team, because of the playoff scenario, even if a team like the Bears, he didn't mention the Bears, but he mentioned the record, you're 3-5, you're really not out of the playoff race.
Exactly.
How do you start selling, so to speak, and tell your team to play hard? You can't. It's all over because of just the way the game is played.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I've been telling fans, don't expect much to happen. But because Jameis Winston went down, and there may be a couple of other teams looking for a veteran quarterback, now you see the name of Andy Dalton being floated around as a potential trade target for some teams. And it doesn't look like Dalton is going to play again for the Chicago Bears, maybe ever again, unless there's an injury to Justin Fields. So isn't he then a trade candidate?
I mean, maybe, but look at did you see the quote that Sean Payton had?
Yes.
It'd be really difficult for us to bring in a quarterback from the outside right now. And it is, because how long does it take to learn a system?
Sure.
And get the guy up to speed, and all of a sudden the season's over.
Right.
So it depends on what the position is. quarterback is very, very difficult. Some other positions, yes, but at the same time, it's like I said just a couple minutes ago, you just don't want to tell the team you're putting up the white flag.
Right.
And it's a different sport than the other sports, just the way the whole thing is set up. And football, basketball, hockey, and baseball are very individualistic games played in a team setting, where football is the ultimate team game. You can't do it. As you see, you're missing one part and you're in big trouble. Right. Or you're missing two parts and you're in big trouble, when that's not the case in those other sports.
Right.
In basketball, it's two players and then all the rest are
exactly. You need two superstars.
Moving parts.
That's right. So true. But one of the things, though, that I think about regarding the Dalton situation, and for instance, what Sean Payton said is, so what happens if the guy that they have in there now, Simeon, he twists an ankle or breaks an ankle, and Taysom Hill is still not available?
Well, they got Ian Book too. They drafted Ian Book in the fourth round.
But you know that Ian Book is not ready for NFL primetime, and a guy like Andy Dalton, who has been in the NFL for 11 seasons, he can come in here, in New Orleans, and he could potentially pick up enough of the playbook to start 3-4 days after arriving. Am I looking? I
don't disagree with you. And could it happen? Yeah, it could happen. Will it happen?
Unlikely.
Unlikely. Yeah. I mean, if you trade Andy, then Nick Foles becomes a backup, and that's not a big deal. Because Fields is going to play. If Fields didn't get pulled after that game last week in Tampa Bay, he isn't going to get pulled unless he gets hurt. And he did bounce back. And, the offense played hard. Remember I said last week, the telltale sign of this team, of whether it's near the end for this group running this team, is how they come back from that slaughter last week in Tampa Bay. Well, the offense came back. They didn't win the game, but they came back. They played stronger. But the defense just didn't show up. And that's amazing. That's scary.
Right. Now, we talked a little bit before we went live, and you said something very interesting about safety Eddie Jackson, who left the game early, and a lot of fans perhaps don't recognize, and that is his value to the team is sometimes overlooked. And tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, is he the greatest tackler in the world? No, he never was. He wasn't when he was in college. Right. But he runs the back end. Very, very smart player. I mean, he's not perfect, but he's been to a Pro Bowler. He's got great instincts. He lines everybody up. You got to have a director, say, of every position group, and he's the director of the defensive backfield. And not having him out there line people up, that was usually, you got a guy, you bring in Tease Tabor to play free safety for part of that game. And Deion Bush, had he not been hurt, he probably would have been the guy. But Tabor used to be a corner,
right?
And it's not, and he's not a corner because he can't run. And he's like a 4.7 guy coming out. He had great instinct, great ball skills when he was at the University of Florida, until he lined up to run a 40, and they found out he ran it in reverse. He was so damn slow, and he still went in the second round, but he was a second round bust. But because of his ball skills and his instincts, the Bears moved him to safety, but he doesn't have a lot of play time there. So, and the big difference when you're playing corner, you're responsible for a smaller section of the field.
Right.
Okay. When you're playing safety, it's everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So your reads are totally different.
Yeah, that was a really tough situation for him to be in. And what about the significance of Khalil Mack not playing in that game?
Well, he draws double and triple team where people say, oh, his production's down. They paid too much for him. Well, look what happens when he's not there.
Yeah, it gets pretty ugly.
You know, he opens up things for other people.
Yeah,
because of all the attention he draws.
And throughout the week with coaches having the game plan for him.
Right. And yeah, I mean, you know, the NFL Network spilled the beans on that like last Tuesday or Wednesday. Oh, he's not going to be available. He's going to go on IR. Well, so now your opponent goes into the game knowing he's not going to be there. And so, and they assume that Quinn's going to be there and he's the guy that they got to contain, and they contained him. It's a lot easier to contain one guy than it is two or three. And, you know, I don't think that Akeem Hicks is playing at 100%.
Yeah. I think that's pretty clear that he's not. Courageous of him to go out there and try to help the team, but he's not.
There was one play in pursuit. He made a play like 20 yards down the field, which is commendable on his part, but still he's not what he was 3 years ago. He's older. Injuries have hit him. He's not as explosive as he was. And I've said it a number of weeks. He's in the last year of his contract. I don't expect him to be back.
Well, and so that leads to my next question is, what do you think could be going on at Halas Hall right now with the general manager and everyone responsible for player personnel decisions? They're looking at the schedule. They're looking at the fact that this season is going to be pretty much dedicated to developing their franchise quarterback at the expense of winning games, because as you said earlier, the Bears probably would have won another game or two if Andy Dalton was the starter. And I completely agree with you. So what could potentially be going on at Halas Hall right now in terms of those guys, Ryan Pace and all his people, preparing for potential moves in the offseason if they're still here?
Well, you can prepare for it, but that doesn't – you're going to prepare for it. You know, I'll tell you a story because this is, you know, Jerry Angelo telling me this.
Okay.
You know, after the fact, after he got let go, he comes into the office that day with the idea in his head is they got to bring in a couple more coaches. They got to make some changes in the coaching staff. He didn't have a clue that he was even on the firing line.
Wow.
And he goes and he walks in, and Ted walks in his office, and all of a sudden he's gone. You know, he was totally blindsided by that.
Yeah. And so, but I almost get the feeling that Matt Nagy may not be blindsided. You can almost, you know, maybe I'm reading too much into what he says at press conferences and so, but there is sort of this sense that, man, if we don't make the playoffs this season, my job is gone. Do you get that sense at all
from him?
Yeah.
I think although he tries to avoid the question the best he can, but you know, and again, go back. All you got to do is look at the Twitter feed on those.
Oh my goodness, it's brutal. Scroll through the Twitter feed of his press conferences, and you know, granted, there are no names, and who gives a darn what they say, right? But
at the same time, that is the general feeling of a majority of the fans. And it doesn't help that you've got most of the major media people feeling the exact same thing.
Yeah, which is, you know, well, so that leads to my next question. Do you think Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are joined at the hip? Is it possible that Ryan Pace could keep his job? I know anything's possible, but what's your gut feeling?
I don't have the answer to that, but I would say that it'd be tough to keep it around, because I mean, you can't put Fox on Ryan Pace. That was really on Ernie Accorsi. And the reason John Fox was brought in was because they wanted to mix. It was like, okay, we got a young guy who's never been a general manager. We want a very experienced guy at the head coaching position. And really, it was never a good idea to begin with. Mm-hmm. And at first, I applauded it. You know, I know John very, very well. We worked together for 4 years in New York, but I know him going back to when he was a DB coach at the University of Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it goes way, way back into the 80s. Mm-hmm. And the guy was always a hell of a coach. And I might have said this before, but you know, back in 2001, when we're making our preliminary list mm-hmm. for the coach in 2002 that never happened, he was at the top of the list. Wow. And he ends up being at Carolina the next year and did a hell of a job.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I mean, he took 2 different teams to Super Bowls, mm-hmm. both the Carolina Panthers and the Denver Broncos. But I think by the time he got here, you know, that was almost his retirement check.
Right. So let me get back to the trade deadline situation, because I was thinking about this when I heard about the Von Miller news. Von Miller traded from the Denver Broncos to the Rams for a second, and I believe it was a 3rd or maybe 4th round draft pick.
The 2nd and 3rd, you know, I got a good friend who scouts for the Rams, and he's got to be thinking, what the hell am I scouting for? We don't got any picks.
Exactly. Scouting for undrafted free agents is
really you're scouting for day 3.
Exactly. Wow.
They don't have a pick on day 1 or day 2 next year.
Before I ask my question, what do you think about that strategy that they
I personally don't like it. As a former college director, I don't like it, because I mean, you know, that's all your work is for the draft. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's worked for the Rams. Sooner or later, it's going to come back to bite them in the ass.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I thought, and I, you know, had a running DM with a guy earlier today after that trade was announced. I said, you know, the Broncos, George Payton just raped the Rams on that deal. Mm-hmm. Von Miller's 32 years old. He's like 10th, tied for 10th on the team in total tackles, but he does have 4.5 sacks. Mm-hmm. And you know he's going to recharge the batteries when he goes to the Rams for, you know, at least when he first gets there. Right. But then, you know, he's had injury problems and he's older. And is he going to be a difference maker for that team? And they gave up a 2 and a 3.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. One of the unique things in this, you don't see it a lot in the NFL. Denver's paying all but $700,000 of his salary. Denver's paying $9 million, and that's one of the reasons they're getting the draft picks back.
Right.
They're picking up 9 of the $9.7 million he's due for the rest of the season. So the trade-off is, okay, we're getting the player, but we're not taking the cap hit. You still got the cap hit. And Denver can afford to do it this year, but then he's off the books and they got extra picks. So I mean, for George, that was a great trade for him.
I agree 100%. And Miller is a free agent next season. So that's maybe a loss for the Rams, because they may not be able to sign him with all the contracts they have. And plus, if Broncos really think that he's got anything left in the tank, maybe they re-sign him. He loves playing in Denver.
They're gambling that they can re-sign him, but what's the number going to be? That was a baseball trade done in football. That was a rental.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, just like San Francisco got Chris Bryant. You know, his contract's up now. Right. So he's a free agent. Is San Francisco going to be able to re-sign him? But the price you give up, and that's what the Rams did. This is a rental, and you very seldom see that in the NFL.
Yeah. Now, explain to fans why it's 99.99999% chance that Khalil Mack will not be traded.
A cap hit. You know, same reason why Quinn's not going to get traded. That, you know, they take the money when you you're not changing the dollar figure. You're changing the figure on how he gets paid.
Right.
And you're taking what they've done when they restructure these contracts is you take current salary and you turn it into bonus money. So the current salary now gets amortized. When it becomes bonus money, it gets amortized over the rest of the length of the contract, thus lowering your cap figure for that particular year. So it's credit card buying, and you're going to pay for it down the road.
So when they made the adjustment on Quinn's contract 2-3 weeks ago, it almost spelled, Quinn's going to be around for next season as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So highly unlikely we'll see anything significant in terms of trades for tomorrow, but this team will be trying to could they potentially be in a buy mode to make that push for the playoffs this season?
No, they don't have the assets to buy. They gave up a 6 in 2023 or something for that returner, and that returner's actually done a pretty good job.
Yes,
so
he has.
that has become, a pretty good trade on Ryan's part.
Mm-hmm.
I just see him. Could there be a minor move?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's more likely is a player for player,
right? Yes.
Giving up a draft pick.
Yeah. So I, if someone called and inquired about Andy Dalton, maybe you would look at the roster and say, well, we need a position player at this. Who do you got? Kind of thing. Is that is that possible?
No. If somebody was going to wanted Andy Dalton, the New Orleans Saints, or somebody else that's got a hole at quarterback, I mean, you're going to be able to squeeze a draft pick out of them, but the Bears aren't going to give up a pick to go out and bring in a player. It's just not going to happen.
They've got 5 draft picks next season, and they don't have a first-round draft pick. So unless they're going to take the Rams approach to building a team, which is way too dangerous, they are not going to trade any draft picks, right?
No, no, it's not going to happen. And they're going to they're going to have money to. Now the cap is going to go up next year to what we don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be approximations coming out around December, and it could go up. I'm not going to say significantly, but it could go up. They've already done deals to, for all the losses that the league had last year, they've made deals with the Players Association to kind of spread those losses out. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to see a $20 million jump in the cap, but you're going to see a jump. Mm-hmm. You're still behind where you should have been had COVID never come about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, and everybody's paying for that. And because of that, you had to make, tough decisions, on certain players. And that's just, the way things are. All of a sudden you got hit with a situation where you had $10-15 million less to play with and salary cap than you thought you did.
Yeah.
When you signed certain people to contracts,
mm-hmm.
And then there's nobody who could foresee that coming.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nobody's fault. It's a way of life, and everybody's got to pay for it.
Right. Years ago, about the time when Ryan Pace was still with the New Orleans Saints organization, I remember reading an article about how poorly Mickey Loomis had managed to cap over there, and that it put the team in some predicament. But nonetheless, they continued to win. And it appears
he's supposed to be the cap guru if you listen to the media.
Yeah, right. Well, apparently he's done certain things to overcome some of the challenges he's put himself in.
I know what he does. He does, the restructuring of contracts.
Okay, which is what Ryan Pace has done, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got and you then, but sooner or later you got to pay the piper,
mm-hmm.
or the contract finally expires.
Right.
And so, but you can't just cut the player because the cap hit is too great. Now you've got, the beauty of having a first round pick on a quarterback, so you don't have to pay this guy an exorbitant amount of money for at least another 3 years, and possibly 4. They've already brought up the question, well, could David Montgomery get traded? Well, he could, but he's hurt. So who's going to trade for him?
Yeah.
Number one. And what I got to word this the right way. what Khalil Herbert has done is proven something that I have been saying for years, and it changed when we took Sed Benson in the first round in 2005. I think it was 2006, 2005. It was a different game, and running backs were at a premium. 3 running backs went in the top 5 that year. Since then, there's been less than 4, I think, that have gone
right
in the top 5. It just doesn't, unless they're extremely special.
Right.
It doesn't happen, and you don't really see a lot. You might see 1 or 2 go in the first round, but a lot of times it's later in the first round. But what Khalil Herbert has proven is that he's a guy that got in the 6th round, and he's a hell of a player. So why do you spend a high premium pick? And second, they are, well, most players can be 1 play away from not playing again. But with a running back, it's more so than anything else. And everybody was down in the doldrums when David Montgomery got hurt, and this guy picks up the slack like, there's nothing wrong.
Exactly. Plays as good as Montgomery to date.
Well, he's not as powerful, but the guy's a hell of a player in his own right. So people, maybe they'll trade him, for a draft choice. Why not have 2? Now, could they do that? Yeah, they could. But, I think in the NFL, having that bell cow has gone away unless the guy's really special. You're better off having 2, and it's even, and you're going to get Cohen back. You've noticed yesterday they had the camera on Cohen a lot on the sidelines.
Yeah, I noticed that.
He's probably chomping at the bit, and and that's another piece of the puzzle. But when is he coming back? I know Nagy mentioned something about it last week. He said he's working hard. One of the reporters, might have been Patrick Finley, showed Tevin Jenkins. He can't practice because he's on PUP, but he was out there with the offensive line taking snaps from. He was the shotgun quarterback. But all that stuff tells you that that he's not that far away from playing.
Now let's talk about Larry Borum, who got his start at right tackle. It was a tough assignment for him. He was lined up against a pretty damn good player, but
one of the
overall, it appeared to my unexpert eyes, to come up with the word unexpert, it appeared that he had a good game.
Yeah, I mean, I have to look at the game tape and say, see how many mistakes he actually made. But yeah, and not only that it was his first game, it's the first time he played since, he had 3 days of practice since week 1. So he's been out 5 weeks, with the knee injury, and he stepped in, he played every snap. I think they stole one with him, but they say they had a 2nd round grade on him.
Almost as good as Jenkins, they said. Yeah.
And you know what? They were right. Which brings in another part of the argument. Okay, if Ryan Pace has done anything, he's done a great job day 2 and day 3 in the draft. And so, do you get rid of him?
Well, here's a great question from the Factor. Who is really most responsible for hitting on those mid and late round draft picks, as the Factor asks here? Is it Pace or is it his scouts? Because
Well,
I've heard
the scouts are the guys going out doing the dirty work,
right.
but it's never one person's opinion. And we've talked about that before.
Yes.
It's a collective opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've got the area scout, you got a cross checker, probably one other scout. You got with an offensive lineman, the offensive line coaches, probably if he didn't work them out, he's done a lot of work with them. And then you've got, and last year you really didn't have private workouts. So in the case of Borum, if he had to go to the pro day to work them out,
mm-hmm.
or see him work out, and then it could be Pace, it could be the director of player personnel, it could be Sadowski, the director of college scouting, but somebody in that decision-making mode is going to have a report, if not two different reports on them. We tried to have about a half a dozen reports on guys, different people, different looks. But the final grade is really a collective. And and I've said this before too, it's guys' grades never quite as high as the highest grade or as low as the lowest grade. It's somewhere in the middle, and you don't average them out.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you've got to take everybody's opinion into account.
Mm-hmm. The factor asks, are the scouts part of Pace's staff, or were they already part of the organization?
Most of these guys were hired by him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at, Phil brought in a couple people, but of the staff I had,
mm-hmm.
Sadowski's still here,
mm-hmm.
and he's the director of college scouting, and Jeff Shiver, who does a lot of the Midwest. And Jeff has been here since like 1986, maybe 1985. Those are the only guys from my staff that are still here. Rex Hogan is the assistant general manager of the New York Jets. Ballard is the Phil Emery, I think, is retired. He was working for the Falcons for a while, and then Ballard's obviously the GM of the Colts. But we had a small staff. We had the smallest staff in the league when I was there. Yet we still drafted 12 Pro Bowl players.
Amazing.
And but we wanted a small staff, and we held them all accountable.
Yeah.
But Teddy Monago, I didn't mention Teddy. Teddy's gone. Teddy is the assistant director of college scouting for the Rams. Those guys were quality guys, but they've gone on to better jobs, making more money.
Right. My recollection of it is that very first draft, the Kevin White draft, or Ryan Pace's first draft with the Bears, all of the scouts were there. He made changes to the scouting staff after that draft.
Yes.
Because you don't want to start over in January with a new scouting staff. You've got to rely on those reports that.
His original director of player personnel was the Jets GM. Okay, and then he left. No, I take that back. It was his original director of college scouting.
Okay.
And then he left to become the Eagles director of player personnel. This is Joe Douglas I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And then Joe left the Eagles to become the Jets GM.
Okay. So I got a great question here for you from, who was it, Chris Watts. He wants to know, hey, can you share some great...
That's the same Chris Watts that played guard for Notre Dame, and that was a second or third round pick.
Well, take a look at his picture.
Then San Diego Chargers.
It doesn't look like him, though. He's from Yorkshire, across the pond there. He wants to know, you got any stories from when you were a scout traveling on the road, going from city to city?
I got a hell of a lot of stories, but they're not
for after dark.
They're not for.
We'll get to some of those sometime in the future. I do find all of this fascinating that, I hate the fact that the Bears are losing, of course, but I do find it fascinating as to kind of look into. I wish I could be a fly in the wall at Halas Hall to figure out what are they talking about, what are they planning for the future. And I'm seeing a lot of comments here in the chat room, Greg, saying that Ryan Pace deserves another chance because he has acquired so many players. Yes, he's made some mistakes. The Adam Shaheen.
Well, there's not a guy in football that hasn't made mistakes.
Great point.
Okay, on on draft day.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's not just draft mistakes; it's free agent mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to hit. And Mike Glennon was a huge mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, looks like Nick Foles was a huge mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to take the good and the bad, but overall, his drafts haven't been bad.
Mm-hmm.
And he hadn't had a first round pick in a few years. No, he did this year. Technically, traded up, and just to get that deal done, you got to give him an A for that. Mm-hmm. That he was able to get the deal done. Did any of us? I knew they wanted to trade up. I had no freaking idea that they were going to be able to move from 20 to 11 and get a Justin Fields. I was really surprised.
So take us into that whole scenario, because I truly thought that all 5 of those first round draft
I thought they had a chance at Mac Jones.
Right, and that's what I thought, because I thought all 5 of them would be gone within the first 10 picks. But here they are. They had the choice of 2 of them after they traded up. How does that happen? That there's this evaluation of these quarterbacks and there's so many different takes on it.
Well, the key thing, in my opinion, anyway, was San Francisco taking Trey Lance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that had San Francisco taken Fields, then or taken Mac Jones, Lance was still going to go because there were people enamored with Lance. I wasn't one of them. I like the talent, and I had a conversation with Daniel Jeremiah, and it was what he could be. And I see a comment there, paying Dalton $10 million was a huge. We're like, no, it wasn't. They got $10 million for Andy Dalton was a bargain. He's a quarterback.
I agree with
quarterbacks
you.
Make money.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Foles thing was a mistake, right?
Yes, but paying Andy Dalton $10 million, that was worth every penny of it. I mean, that's what quarterbacks want. Guy was a multi-time Pro Bowler, took his team to the playoffs 5 times. He was worth $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, to get back to me, the whole key to that draft was Lance going 3rd, because I think there was people that were ready to jump on Lance later, and then Fields. And had that happened, you might have been right, and all 5 of them might have gone in the top 10. Mm-hmm. But it just when they took Lance, it took some other people. For some reason, there's people that weren't sold on Fields, and part of it, I think, was some bad pub put out on him that he wasn't a worker. Well, if anything, he's a worker, and some teams may have done that. I mean, there's a lot of times you put stuff out that you get a reporter that you like who will put out some negative stuff for you, and it's the lying season. And so
that's right.
But still, that he was able to do that. Now we can change the subject a little bit here too. And sure. I know I'm going all over the place, but
that's okay.
Okay. So who was really the best quarterback? Well, the guy who's doing the best right now is Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And why is that? Jones, I'll tell you right now, it's because he was the most ready to play. Okay, he played in a pro-style offense. The adjustment, very, very smart guy. And the adjustment from what he's doing, what he did at Alabama and what he's doing in New England wasn't that big.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? And so he was more pro ready than a lot of these other guys who are playing in college spread offenses. But at the same time, when you're doing the evaluation process, not only are you looking at today, but who's going to be the better guy 3 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's fair to that. Could Mac Jones become Tom Brady Jr.? I mean, yeah, he could.
There's a chance, yeah.
But when you look at it, the upside of these other guys is a little bit more than Mac Jones is. Now, the two that were surprises to me that Lance I couldn't buy into because he only played one game in the 2020 season, and all his competition was 1AA, FCS level competition.
Mm-hmm.
He never played against the big boys. Now, granted, he was running a solid offense, and he was accurate, and he had a strong arm, and made big plays. He can make big plays. He can make plays with his feet, but still, he was jumping like 3 levels of competition. FCS to Group of 5 to Power 5 to the NFL. Well, the other guys like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, they're taking one step.
Yep.
I mean, they had played on the biggest stage. They played in the college football playoffs, both multiple years had done that. So, what they've been around is totally different. To me now, the quarterback that the Jets took, Wilson, another guy, he's a Group of 5 guy.
Yeah.
Who, especially last year and the year before, he was very average. So he came on, he had that big year this past season. BYU didn't play anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then they played one really good team. I think it was Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina kicked his rear end.
That's right. That's what I can't get over, that those quarterbacks, Trey Lance and Zach Wilson, given the competition that they had, given the small portfolio, like Mitchell Trubisky had 1 year as a starter,
right,
that those guys were valued higher than a Justin Fields and even
because they're looking at what he can be.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you now, you probably watched them. They televise all this stuff now. Wilson's pro day was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I take a pro day and throw it out the window. I think they are totally useless for quarterbacks, not for other positions, for quarterbacks. And this is why. They're totally scripted.
Mm-hmm.
And they are run by the private quarterback coach, the quarterback guru, not the school's quarterback coach, but the guy that's hired by the agent to tutor this guy for 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And they are scripted out to show the player's strengths and not show any of his weaknesses.
Yep.
And of course, they're throwing on air. But he had one play, and I remember tweeting about it, and then everybody else did it after him, except for Trevor Lawrence, because Lawrence had to have the shoulder surgery, and he had his very, very early. But rolling out to the left, and while rolling out to the left, throwing, and he throws a dime about 50 yards down the field.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then all of a sudden, Justin Fields had to do that. The other guys had to do it. And Justin Fields, one-upped him.
That's right.
Because it's like, okay, you can do that. I can do that too. And Justin Fields did it yesterday. Now, granted, it was only like a 20-yard throw or whatever it was yesterday. But that's when the bullets were live.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you say that, because I remember I was never a fan of Johnny Manziel when he played in college, and then I saw his pro day on the NFL Network, and I
when they had the brooms up in the air and stuff.
Yeah, right. And I said to myself, "Oh, you know what? This guy actually looks pretty good. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he is going to be a good pro." No.
His problem was not talent.
His head, right?
He was a druggie. He was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
It was everything else. It was like football was at the bottom of the totem pole. His football character was zilch.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one thing, the guy was a really good liar because he said he would, in interviews, he would say all the right things and you would think he's sincere and he's going to be okay. And then his actions were totally opposite from what he would say.
Right, no,
Tremendous waste of time.
Total goofball. I mean, he was a great college quarterback. You can't take that away from him. But don't forget he's playing in college. But once he got the money and got into the NFL, it became Party City.
Okay. All right. So I want to finish off by talking a little bit about this upcoming game against the Steelers. 4 weeks ago, we looked at that. Man, the Steelers are done. Oh my goodness. They look awful. Now they've won three straight games and they're looking like world beaters. This is not looking good for the Bears on the road.
And
Monday night.
They beat Cleveland yesterday. I didn't watch any of that game, but Cleveland's beaten up right now. So yes. Cleveland's not playing with a full deck. So you got to take that into consideration. But one thing about Pittsburgh, and did you see the Mike Tomlin? I don't know if we talked about it last week. The presser last week, Mike Tomlin's name got brought up for the USC job.
Right. Yes.
He ripped those guys a new rear end.
Good for him.
And it was very sincere about it. And screened out, he goes, you don't see him. People asking Andy Reid if he wanted to put an end to it real quick. Or he goes, you don't see Sean Payton getting asked those questions. Why are you asking me? But he works for, in my opinion, the best organization in the NFL. Yeah. Top to bottom, that is a class organization. They've only had 2 GMs in history.
That's amazing.
I know.
That is amazing.
They hire a coach about every 20 years. Why? The stability of that franchise is unbelievable as compared to anybody else. I mean, they're the reason. You look at their model and you say that's why you don't want to fire somebody too quick. But it's been built in. Like Kevin Colbert, who's a friend of mine, was elevated to the GM, but Kevin worked there for a few years before he became the GM. So he knew, and he was brought up in the area. He started off his career with the Dolphins, and then he was with the Detroit Lions, but he spent a long time. He was brought up in that Pittsburgh area and then spent time within the organization before he was elevated to GM.
I got to tell you, I've read also that the Bears want to emulate what the Steelers have done with that stability with the GM and coaches and so forth. So those people who may want Matt Nagy gone might be in for a surprise if the Bears elect to take that same approach as the Steelers.
I'm saying this, okay, and I have no idea what's going to happen or what's not going to happen, but in my opinion, if Matt Nagy's gone, it's not Ryan Pace's decision. That's a George McCaskey, Ted Phillips, Virginia McCaskey decision.
Interesting. Well, and I've always gotten the impression from them that they love to give coaches and their administrators the benefit of the doubt. And so you almost can sense sometimes with what Matt Nagy is saying at press conferences, saying things like we're making progress and always kind of shining a positive light on things and talking about the culture and so forth, that he might be making an appeal to Mr. McCaskey and Virginia McCaskey.
Well, George is a lot different than Michael was.
Oh,
yeah. George is going to make decisions a lot differently than Michael. Totally different personalities.
It does seem like George also listens to the fans, and he responds to a lot of letters that he gets from his season ticket holders. He interacts with fans at games and so forth. And so those fans are sharing their disapproval. And, and a lot of players have been very vocal. A lot of ex-players have been very vocal about disapproval.
That's the key, is that you've got a lot of ex-players that live in the area that have been very vocal in recent weeks. And I think that carries some weight.
Last question for you. We had on Doug Plank, I think, a couple of years ago, and one of the things that he was complaining about was that the Bears have never given an opportunity for former players to be assistant coaches, to be coaches, to work in an administrative and so forth. And his contention was, you got guys who are bleeding navy blue and orange. These guys know the history of the Chicago Bears. These guys are smart. Like he mentioned, Jerry Fensick could be a GM candidate or could have been a GM candidate and so forth. Do you think that there's any value in looking at people who have played for the Bears to hold decision-making posts after their playing careers are done?
If they're qualified, sure. It's some of these people want the job, and I'm not specifically talking about names you mentioned.
Okay.
They want the job, but they don't want to work they don't want to climb the ladder to they want the job right off the bat.
Yeah, I've heard that about a former middle linebacker who wore number 50 and is in the Hall of Fame. But
so they don't want to learn, and like somebody sent me a text during the week. Well, do you think the Bears should hire Peyton Manning to run the front office as the new president?
Mm-hmm.
When's the last time Peyton Manning ran a football team? And I'm not saying he couldn't,
right?
But he's been a freaking quarterback.
You want to see people with some experience.
And he said, yeah. I mean, and they said, well, John Elway did it. John Elway made a lot of mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And he had people above him. And then got, finally got that top job. But, it's not easy. And when you don't, Lynch has made some mistakes. Lynch is, goes from broadcasting to the front office. Mm-hmm. Overall, I think Lynch has done a real good job in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Bottom line, though, is that, people talking about Shanahan. Now, how about Shanahan's only had one winning season?
Wow, I didn't know that. As
a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
That was the year they went to the Super Bowl.
Amazing.
Yeah. He's still got a losing record this year.
That is amazing.
But he's the greatest coach in the NFL, just about, But
That's right.
One winning season.
Well, up until yesterday, a lot of people in San Francisco were wondering whether he should continue to hold on to his job. He got a reprieve yesterday.
Right. And so, hey, it's a funny game. What have you done for me lately? Mm-hmm. You win and everybody loves you. And you lose and everybody hates you.
Right.
And this city's harder. I've worked in two big media markets, this one in New York. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say Chicago's a lot tougher than New York ever was.
Because?
Part of it, I think, is the emergence of talk radio.
Okay.
And social media since I've been here.
Yeah.
Where it's been 20 years now since I've been here. Mm-hmm. And you didn't have that the whole time I was in New York. There was WFAN, which was just, still was becoming an entity, but wasn't the entity that it is now. And talk radio was still in its infancy when I was with the Giants. And now it's huge.
Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, every time we do a show together, I learn, and you're such a great storyteller. This has been fantastic. It's unfortunate, though, we're not talking about wins. We're talking about losses.
That's why we got to change the subject, because we're
exactly.
Otherwise, you'll be walking out the door, and
I'll be walking on that ledge.
Exactly.
So why don't we do this again next week? But let's do it on Tuesday after the game, because they're playing Monday night football. What do you think?
Sure.
All right. Greg, Gabriel, you are the absolute best. I will let people know that we've got tons of more programming. It's not just Chicago Bears program. We've got Cubs, we've got Sox, we've got Bulls. We got 3 Bulls programs on the network now. We've got hockey, and we've got entertainment. In fact, tonight we'll be recording Science Fiction, a show about science fiction movies. So for all of us here at the Barroom Network, that man is Greg Gabriel. My name is Aldo Gandia. We will see you here next week after that win against the Steelers. Right, Greg? It's going to be a win, right?
I hope so.
Right.
I'll tell you one thing. It's going to be that's a backyard brawl when you play the Pittsburgh Steelers. You better get ready to be fighting in that game.
Yeah. Well, then we might end up losing that game because I'm not sure what the defense is doing nowadays.
If you play the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's always a street. They are the most physical team in football. Always have been.
See, you're always inspiring me to ask more questions. I was a big Chase Claypool fan coming out of Notre Dame, and I wanted the Bears to draft him.
Yeah, no, I love Chase Claypool.
I wanted him more than Cole Kmet, and I wasn't down on Cole Kmet, but I just thought Chase Claypool was going to be an outstanding player, and a missed opportunity for the Bears. They could really,
I'll tell you one thing. Chase Claypool, his last year at Notre Dame was playing at about 230, maybe 235. To me, I was thinking, boy, what if you use this guy not only as a wide receiver, but as your move tight end? And, so I'm with you. I like Cole Kmet, and he's starting to come on.
Yes, he is.
And I think, the position he's playing is not an easy position. If you look at the history of tight ends and when they finally break out and very
3 seasons.
Yeah. And it just takes a while for the most part for them to really break out because they're really asked to do a lot. And, they're part of the run game. They're part of the passing game. They're a very important part of the run game. It's a unique position, but Claypool would have created some mismatches that would have been tough to.
Man, I don't believe we let him go away. But Ryan Pace, hopefully better decisions ahead. And again, I learned so much from working with you on this show, Greg. Really an honor and a pleasure. And we'll see you here next week. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.